Welcome. I was earlier in the week when we were applying the PowerPoint, I was saying that there would be a chance that we would be presenting just to Jeff. I wasn't sure how many people would actually be here on a Friday right before spring break, so I'm very grateful for all of you being here. This talk is called Building the Ramp, Strategies to Facilitate Learning for All Students. And as Jeff just said, it really evolved out of the Gold Square program, which is a pilot project that we have on campus, on this campus this semester, this year, to really add to what the Accessibility Office is able to provide and has to provide by law. And as we do the talk, you'll understand a little bit more why we decided to create this project to add to what the university has to provide by law. This PowerPoint was put together by the four of us, myself, Marie-Christine Husband, and Monique Chabot. The two of us are faculty members in the OT department here on the East Falls campus. And then our two wonderful third-year master students, OT students, who are doing their final clinical fieldwork placements with us through the Gold Square project, who are Shana Cato and Elizabeth. Shana is actually a student from the Center City campus who joined us, and Liz was one of our students and they're both sort of treating students on campus as part of the Gold Square program. I get to start this talk by talking a bit about disabilities, and then so I'll tell you a bit about some of the disabilities that students that are on campus have. Then we'll talk about some of the strategies that we could use in our classes to really make things easier for students with disabilities. And then we're going to finish this talk by doing a couple activities where you start generating a plan on some of the things that you might want to shift in your own courses or ways of teaching to really make life easier for students with disabilities. So this is sort of our overall plan for today. But let's start with who's on campus. When I say disabilities, what do I mean? So there are students on campus with a variety of disabilities. Some of the most common ones that we are interacting with are individuals who have autism spectrum disorder, learning disabilities, ADHD or ADD, anxiety and depression. But again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are others. Just those are some of the ones that we most commonly encounter, and that probably in the classroom has the most impact on their learning and their behavior, so you would actually notice that they have those disabilities. What's important to keep in mind is that although they have disabilities, these students all have normal or above normal intellectual ability. So their IQ is normal. We're not talking about students. There are some projects across the country with students who have intellectual disabilities going to college. This is not what we're talking about today. We're talking about students who have normal intelligence, they did well in high school, but they have disabilities, and on their own merit come to this university. So they have normal intellectual abilities, but they also have diverse learning needs. They learn a little differently, and they need a little bit different help to maximize their learning. So what are the numbers? There's about 100 students who have disabilities and who have registered with the Disability Office or the Accessibility Office on campus. So out of the 3,000 student-ish we have on this campus, at least 100 of them have disabilities. And I say at least because there's a large number of students who choose to not disclose that they have a disability. And we'll talk about some of the reasons for that later. So the 100 is the 100 people who actually have disclosed that they have disabilities. Okay. Now, what is striking is that individuals who have disabilities and who go to college, only 34% of them graduate. And when we look at the general population, it's about 60%. So it's almost half. Half as fewer people with disabilities graduate from college as the general population. So there's clearly a gap there. There's no reason for people who, did well in high school, have normal intelligence to come to college and not be able to succeed at least as well as everybody else. So why should we care as faculty members and staff members and administration? We should care because retention rates is one of the ways that universities are actually compared to one another. The university cares about this retention rate because if we drop more students, our retention rate goes lower, and then I forget the name of the national website where all the universities are rated, but our ranking goes lower. We want, like we have on our website, like the percent of people who get jobs right out of their undergrad, because that's something that's really important to a university. We should also care because there's a social cost to not going to college. People with disabilities have a much lower rate of employment than people without disabilities, but that gap is reduced a bit when they have a college education. So if they have a college education, even if they have disabilities, they're more likely to be employed, which means there's less society dollars being used to support them. But I think to me personally, and maybe to us personally, although I don't know if that sentence makes sense. Can it be a to us personally? Okay. Social justice is the most important reason. So I'm going to take you back in time a bit, and sorry for the shocking pictures. Over the last 300 or 400 years, we've come a long way in the way that we think about disabilities and education for people with disabilities. If we go to 300-400 years ago, essentially even 200 years ago, people who had a disability were put in prison, and babies who were born with physical disabilities that were obvious were just left to die. So that's where we started. At some point in the late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, we began to create, we transitioned from prison to mental health institutions. And just sort of warehouse people. There would be a lot of physical and verbal and mental abuse, and people with disabilities would be put in institution. As we moved into the 20th century, we moved from that to sort of the special institution school for people with disabilities. So in Vermont, where I lived before I lived here, there's a very famous institution that was supposedly a school that's called Brandon, and that school closed in the mid-1980s, so not that long ago. And so people, the baby was born, the baby had a disability, or the baby was 2 or 3, they weren't speaking as quickly as they should have, their behavior was a little bit erratic, and at the age of 3 or 4 would be sent to this institution where they lived their entire life. Education wasn't part of it. We were still sort of warehousing people with disabilities. In the 60s came the civil rights movement, and as we were talking about equal rights for education for black and white, people with disabilities and their families sort of raised their hand and said, us too. We also want education. And like as a society, we went, oh yeah, sure. I guess if they're able to ask for education, we should provide them with education, right? And so special education law got created, and this was in 1974, if I'm getting my dates correctly. And for the first 20 years or so of this, we're still talking about kids with disabilities in public schools, but in special schools or special classrooms, given an alternate curriculum, really not being taught to their maximum potential. And it's really only in the last 10 or 15 years or so that has completely shifted, and we are going, hey, they have different abilities, but if we teach them right, and so it's that term differentiated instruction, if we teach them the right way, they can achieve their maximum potential. So that's where we are now. We have a lot of students with autism, learning disabilities, and ADHD, who in elementary, middle, and high school have been given extensive special education, not a different curriculum, same curriculum, just different way of teaching them and helping them show and learn, show what they knew and learn. And these students graduate with a high school degree, and they want to come to college, right? This makes perfect sense. So they're here. This is the problem, though. In public schools, there's 2 laws. There's special education law, which is all that differentiated instructions, and then there's accommodations, right? So if somebody is blind, we're not going to give them a paper book. We're going to give them, an audio reader. If somebody is not able to write properly, they might have a scribe. Somebody is writing for them in class, right? So those are accommodations. Special instruction is a different way to teach them how to learn. Once they get to college, there's no more special education. That goes away. The law ends once they leave high school, And all we have to provide legally are accommodations, which they're called 504 plan. Now, one might say, well, if that's the law, then clearly that should work, right? Like, that should be enough. Well, when we know that there's only 34% of them that actually graduate, we also know that 504 plan alone isn't going to work. So this is what created the Gold Square program initially, was our desire to provide added support to what the university has to provide by law. But really, to achieve that, we need your help. There's no way that we can ourselves, sort of make this up on our own. So we need the help of the faculty in tweaking things just a little, just enough, so that everybody is more successful on campus. Let me tell you just a little bit more about the disabilities of the students who are on campus. And Jeff has organized a number of talks this year. So there's been somebody who came and talked about ADHD. I've talked about autism a couple months ago. So like these conversations have been going on campus. So I'm going to really do the gloss over one slide, 20-second summary. But there are other resources to learn more about these disabilities. So autism. Think of autism as being primarily a problem with understanding the social world around you. Understanding social norms, understanding social interactions, other people's emotions, verbal and nonverbal communication. That's the primary challenge in autism. And we can talk a lot about what that looks like. But you also have to keep in mind that people who have autism often have executive function problems. So that is not part of their diagnosis. That's the diagnosis. But these problems are very real for individuals who have the diagnosis of autism. Learning disabilities. People with learning disabilities have normal intelligence. They do really well on IQ scores. Actually, sometimes they have above normal intelligence. But in one area of academic learning, one or more, they have problems. So that could be math, reading, or writing. So you can have normal intelligence and be an amazing creative writer and be in college, but really be doing math at the third grade level. And the way you would learn math is difficult, and even with specialized instructions, you might never catch up to your typical peers, right? So that's a learning disability. People who have learning disabilities also have executive function problems. ADHD, probably something that everybody knows what it is, right? The one thing to keep in mind is that by the time people come to university, adults with a diagnosis of ADHD primarily have attention problems, not hyperactivity. So it's not like the young kids on the playground bouncing everywhere, right? They're not going to be the young adults in your classroom bouncing everywhere. Some of them have, more hyperactivity or more impulsivity. But at that point in time, it's more a problem of attention than hyperactivity. Individuals with ADHD also have executive function problems. So guess what's coming next? What do I mean by executive function? So executive function is a number of high-level cognitive processes in the brain that includes working memory, how many pieces of information you can have in your brain at one time, processing, how quickly you can play with that information in your brain, planning and organization are self-explanatory, cognitive flexibility and shifting. The example is, you change a deadline or you change an expectation on an assignment, and like you have half your class go, they probably are challenged with cognitive flexibility and then emotional regulation. One thing to think about executive function is that's something that we all do, and we all have good days and bad days with executive functions, right? If your stress level is really, really high, your executive function goes lower, right? So that's true for all of us in some ways. And, my close colleague, my working memory isn't very good. And so I ask people to write everything down. Like I shouldn't be asked to remember anything that I have to do in 30 seconds because my short-term memory is not good. And that's one of my executive function problems. So that's the core of what we see in the students with disabilities, in addition to some of the behavior that are a bit unusual, are executive function problems. It's all safe.
Is it still on? Or is this?
Okay. So we talked about a lot of the challenges, but there's also a lot of strengths to these students. They're very creative. They like to think outside of the box, and this is because they just see the world differently, so they learn to be creative. They're also very resilient and persistent because it does take them more to do things, and they do have to push harder. And if they didn't have that kind of work ethic, they would never make it to college in the first place, honestly. So this is a lot of untapped talent. They have strengths, they're good at things, they should be able to graduate and show the world what they can do. So I just don't want everybody to think that it's just challenges. So these are some of the direct quotes from the students that we see at Full Square. This is from last semester and this semester. They talk about difficulty with note-taking, determining what information is important, and being confused on what to focus on and study. The one that stands out to me is, I only understand 40% of the information from class. So that's not good, right? We want at least 75. So they're unsure of due dates, they're unsure of assignment details, they're unsure of their grading expectations, they're unsure of how they're doing in class. So one of the things that this isn't totally uncommon for most students, but the students that we're talking about, they take longer to do all of their schoolwork. And this is, I know this for the truth because I have learning disabilities. It takes me longer to do all my schoolwork. It still does. It was okay in high school. It really became a problem in college because there's just more expectation on you. So I had to juggle. I learned it doesn't mean you can't do it, right? Because here I am. But these types of challenges, when you have these on top of whatever your longer work hours, whatever, it just makes everything that much harder. So the solutions that we're going to provide won't just benefit the students with disabilities, they'll benefit all the students because I'm sure all the students have experienced these at some point.
Okay, so going along with what Liz was saying, just take a moment to look at some of these challenges. We're going to have another slide of them as well. Just take a moment to read them. And as Liz mentioned, these are some of the challenges for our students in particular, but also challenges that are seen in the literature time and time again. The main ones that really pop out in this context are interacting with faculty and peers. That's important for our students to be able to ask you guys questions, ask for help, so they can get that support. But that's going to be a challenge for them. And that's one of the many things we're going to continue to talk about. Monique will touch on again.
I think, on the flip side, from a faculty point of view, what I hear faculty say is, well, I have open hours. They could have come to me, right? Why didn't they not ask? It's in the syllabus. If they didn't understand, they could have asked. I hear that all the time. Hey, I say that all the time. But as you think about their disabilities, to expect them to just ask is not going to work nearly as well. And so that's why we have to talk about solutions.
Yeah. And really, as you may know, any student may kind of just find you intimidating because you're this big, awesome professor, and these students, it might just take it to another level for them. So it's going to be next slide. And just a few more challenges to take a look at. Again, Monique is actually going to talk about some of the solutions to these challenges. Just go back. Yeah. Another big point to hone in on is the organization. So this isn't just, some of it may be organization of books and schoolwork and that, but this is also going to be time management and organization of time. Again, something we'll touch on. Okay. So, common student fears. something, maybe some of these are fears for all students, but when we're talking about the students we see, these are some things they've said to us, but also there's been some studies, and there were actually interviews of students in higher education that expressed the feeling of being stigmatized or the fear of being stigmatized. So that's that fear of being misunderstood, that maybe their peers feel they have an unfair advantage, or that something's wrong with them because they're taking extra time on their tests, or they're not putting the work in. So all these things are going to add on to the difficulty with approaching your instructor and asking for help, is that fear of being stigmatized. So.
Now we know that students have fears, but we also know that faculty members have concerns when we talk about students with disabilities. And so on the slide is what you see are some of the concerns that we have heard over the last year in the projects. We've heard that, we can give them more support here, but how are they going to cut it in the real world when they actually have to get a job, right? Or I don't have enough time as a faculty member to really do what is needed to help these students. I don't know how to help. And this perception that if we provide help for one student, it might be unfair for the other students in the class. So these are some of the concerns from faculty that we've heard. I want you guys to take a couple moments and write down on a piece of paper any concerns that you have right now about this idea of providing support to students with disabilities on campus. Okay, some folks who want to share out loud some of their concerns. This is a place of no judgment. Any concerns are good concerns.
I think one of the concerns that I have, and I have a mixed international and U.S. audience, is we found that when we work really hard to try to create a safe environment to fail, to make mistakes, that begins to address some of the concerns, not just for our international students, but for everybody. Because when you have the second language issues and think about their processing, go back to their basic, whatever they bring into it with their learning curve, wherever it may be, everything gets so complicated.
You're giving us actually a solution, and one of the solutions that we went to the solution board, and one of the solutions that you're giving us, which you actually hadn't captured, so we'll now have to steal your idea and add it to the PowerPoint next time, is to make it a safe place for students to try and fail. And actually, it's something that we've had to do in our program as well, and in OT school, because people are so worried about, taking risks. But how do you learn without taking risks, right? Any other concerns as you're thinking about students with disabilities on campus?
More of being aware of students that have them that aren't identified. And I agree about creating that rapport relationship or that safe environment. So it's almost a blanket coverage, but how sometimes do you differentiate and know if someone is struggling or they're just going for a ride? And you want to hope between the two. You hope you recognize, but still sometimes.
But if they don't approach you and say, I need a little extra help, I had a 504, whatever, they don't identify themselves as having any concerns for themselves, and you kind of get a feeling maybe because of, the time frames and things that they turn in, or however, you kind of get in your mind like, maybe he needs a little extra help. Can you approach them? Is that legal or moral or however you want to, where you just wait for them to come to you, which is an issue?
We'll keep talking about some of the concerns that we captured. So one of the concerns that you're bringing up, Anita, is this idea of if we have questions, how can we actually address the students and get that information? And that's a definitely, I think it speaks to your concern as well. I also heard you say, sometimes it might be a disability. Sometimes they might just, be going for a ride. It just might be,
Right.
I'm going to use the word lazy. I don't know if that's the word that you had in mind, but how do you differentiate between disability and laziness when the student hasn't disclosed a disability, right? So great concern. Other concerns?
How do you
I guess, manage the student when they have to do group projects.
How do we support students with disabilities in groups? Oh, yeah. Other concerns.
It's a great question.
I think mine, how do we accommodate the students that are in the design majors with a 4-hour studio?
Yes. So in specific majors and specific programs, how do we provide the accommodations and what are some of the correct ways to do it? One more, there's one more.
If you've got a student that's receiving accommodations and this has been over a period of time and they don't appear to be addressing the problems, is there ever like a cutoff point where you say, okay, we have to sit down and talk about, are you the right major? Blah, blah, blah.
So I think that at which point is accommodations not enough, right? If I go back to that slide where I was showing that we don't actually provide differentiated instruction per se, at what point do we go, unfortunately, with all the supports that we can and do have at our disposal, this is not the right fit for you? And how do we have that conversation?
Other concern is responsibility on the student. Responsibility on the student.
How do we make sure that they're young adults and that they take responsibility in the context of they have disabilities, they have challenges, and they have executive function problems, right? And how do we balance those things? These are all great concerns. So we're going to be providing some problems and solutions on the slides. We can't address all of these concerns all in one talk in an hour and a half, but not that I'm volunteering for this to happen more than once, but a lot of these things could be addressed if we had, let's say, a book club conversation around disability and learning. Potentially in a far away future. Giving Jeff ideas. All right, challenge and solution.
So thank you for sharing your concerns with us. We touched a little bit on the challenges that are faced by the students in terms of their diagnosis. We're going to now recap some of the challenges that we actually hear from our clients themselves, and some possible solutions, small itty-bitty things that we can put into place as faculty members that actually will ultimately benefit everybody. So as we were mentioning the 504 plan in the university level, it looks like this. You see, these are probably the most common accommodations that Zoe provides for the students: extra time in private room for testing. We have some smart pens that help record lectures. They're actually really neat. We learned I can play the piano the other day. And also text-to-speech software. So these are some things that we do already with varying levels of success, and for some students it is very, very helpful. For others it gets them to a certain point, but then this is where we fill in the rest of the gap.
Is there any that we forgot on that list? That there are common accommodations?
Testing time is usually one. Assistive technology we've really using a lot. There's some apps for note taking, like Notability, Evernote, just recording. And I think that the simple one I usually recommend, highly recommend taking a picture. So especially like in math or physics, if the professor, instructor has a problem on the board, taking a picture with your phone or tablet, and that really works. Note-taking devices, sometimes we ask a student to copy their notes. They send it to me, then confidentiality and privacy reasons, I send it off. But just, using a smartphone or tablet is perfect.
There's a lot of really neat stuff coming out too. So before we move on, the ADA requires that we do provide these accommodations, but we really, even though we're talking about our students with disabilities, we really just want to drive home the point that what we're talking about is everybody. This picture we have also on the board here kind of gets that to the point where you've got snow on a set of stairs, and there's also a ramp here and a student in a wheelchair. And they're saying that he's shoveling off the stairs to help these students get in, but he has to wait. But if all they did was just shovel the ramp, everybody can get in. So that's the concept that we're going off of, is that we do a couple of things maybe it is just for these students, but ultimately it clears up things for everybody, and all our students are going to be happier for it.
Because remember, when I talk about executive function is something that we all struggle with to some degree, and it gets worse with stress, and that is true for all students. This means that a lot of the solutions that we're going to be talking about although in this context we're talking about, students with disabilities, I promise if you put these things in place, all the students will benefit.
Just add another thing. Universal design. So universal design for everyone, possibly having, an untimed test or preparing a test that normally would take 45 minutes, even though you may have a 90-minute class. Do that. So whoever needs extra time can do that. Have different modes of teaching, whether it's verbal, it's written. So doing that for everyone.
Right, so for the clarity is key. The organization and planning is a problem. Pretty much, I think we can agree for all of our students on some level or another. It is a higher level task in the brain, and they're developing these skills anyway now that they're in college. So since it is such a challenge, the clearer and more explicit we can be, the better. Especially in terms of due dates, assignment details, and the expectations for the assignments. We right now are using Blackboard. I know we've been kind of testing out different learning management systems. It can be your friend. It's a great place to put stuff up and have students know that if you need the syllabus, if you need due dates, if you need assignment details, it's all right there in one handy dandy place. So they don't have to go around looking for it or try to find it in the mess on their desk or have to come ask for it. So class materials, documents, even class notes, grades, especially so that they know how they're doing, and feedback on assignments because they're very eager for feedback so they can do better the next time around. So we're also going to run out of the next ones, some specific things that we can tweak, like in terms of syllabus, rubrics, and different kind of interactions. So starting off with the syllabus, some challenges that we do see fairly often is not knowing either when the due dates are, or maybe they're not listed, or assignments don't get assigned for maybe like 2 days before they actually want it done. And that doesn't give anybody really enough time to be able to plan proactively, schedule their time, especially if they need more time to get it done. And it's hard for them to schedule a routine so they can get into the habit of getting their work done. Assignment expectations is another thing that we hear a lot of, like, I just don't know what is expected. We hear it from our own students a lot of, but what did you really mean by this? Even though we try to be very, very clear. It all depends on how people actually interpret things, but knowing what to expect and what the parameters are is very helpful. And knowing test dates, so it doesn't sneak up on them and add to their stress level. But some solutions we have, and we'll show you a picture of some of them on the next couple slides, is a schedule at a glance, which kind of puts everything in one handy dandy spot in the syllabus. Posting on Blackboard ahead of time, as much ahead of time as you can. And then giving visual or auditory reminders for due dates, be it in class or some other method, whatever works for you in terms of what you have going on. But being able to have a steady routine, like knowing that all of the reading assignments are going to be due on Thursdays and things like that, actually help the students with that planning and organization and help build some of those skills.
Visual and graphics are really helpful. Like syllabus are often very text heavy, but then they have to sort through all that information to get. If you have if you're reading more slowly, that becomes a problem. It's been interesting because as part of Goal Square, students have come in with their syllabus as we're trying to help them organize and working with them. And sometimes we can't figure out in the syllabus what's going on and what the expectations are. So it's not like the students should know what the expectations are and just can't figure it out. Like I feel fairly well educated, and I feel like if I can't figure it out, there's likely a problem with the syllabus and the clarity of the expectations.
And something else to do is also to list more up towards the top where they are still probably reading, because I know sometimes we have the most beautiful syllabi in the world and people just don't read. But really up towards the front where they are still paying attention, listing out the supports of where they can go on campus for help, like Zoe's office and student accessibility or the academic success center. So it's right there, the very front. They know there's someplace they can go, and it also sets a tone of support moving forward. So here's what a schedule at a glance could look like. This grid with, you have the date of class, you have the topics and student responsibilities, which can also include readings or whatever else you want to stick in here. We have the yellow and highlighted in yellow to really catch their eye and draw them over there. And then you'll notice that it's also color coded, like the tests are going to be in bold on this one. Learning activity 3 actually has multiple parts and it's always going to be in blue. So especially for those longer term projects that they have to do through a semester that can be really hard for them to manage and plan, they can actually look and say, I see all the blue down in their schedule. Actually, that's something I use in my own daily schedule, just showing Colleen the other day that how color-coded my own personal schedule is so I can track these longer assignments. But something like this can actually help them at a glance figure out what's going on. All right, so then going on to grading rubrics, and I know the design professor with pink hair. What's her name?
Donna Scott.
Donna. I don't know if I started with a K, I don't know why. I've heard her talk a couple times on grading rubrics. I know in the design field it's very tough sometimes to quantify some of that more creativity-based things. I think she does a great job describing how you can do it even in those fields. So if you ever have a chance to solicit her advice, I would recommend following up, like throwing her, like, here, she's gonna have more questions now, but I don't think she would mind too much. But grading rubrics are really handy in setting the grading criteria and knowing the expectations of assignments. And something that we see happen too is that they start spiraling where if there's not clear expectations, they don't know what's good enough. And so then they almost get stuck in a spiral of hyper-focusing of like, I don't know if this is enough, I don't know if this is what they're looking for. This is what the instructions say, but did I actually meet what I'm supposed to do? And so providing a written rubric with very clear expectations for each level can help break that cycle and help them know, okay, well, I think I am in this, this column or another column. I think I might have done enough, and help them put their energy towards something else, perhaps, once they feel like they've done a good enough job. It also does clear up the requirements and expectations so they won't miss something that was actually supposed to be there. And it also helps to have frequent check-ins. I'm going to show some pictures of. So like this one, the criteria are all on the side here. So the question on this one is like, what does exceed minimum expectations really look like? And they might actually get caught. And like, well, did I exceed it? Did I meet it? Whatnot, but at least you can see what their grade would be. And then on the next one, you can see here's everything that has to be in this PowerPoint, for example. And then it specifically lists what each section would look like. So then we were talking about all the different supports for note-taking with Zoe, and for good reason. It's a very, very, very complex task when you actually break it down into what you have to do. Like right now, anyone who's taking notes has to listen to me. You have to maybe look at what's on the screen. You have to write. You have to write fast enough to keep up with what I'm saying. You actually have to process in your head what I'm saying in order to get it into your muscles to be able to write it down. And you have to decide what I'm saying is important enough to write down in the first place. And that's just a small snapshot of everything that goes into note-taking. So you can see how very quickly any student can get kind of lost. But some of the common things we hear is trouble keeping up with the lecture notes and then figuring out what's actually important among all the fun little facts that we find personally fascinating and might throw out there for fun. And so some solutions is just lecturing at a slower pace and taking time to pause to let them catch up. If I gave you guys a couple minutes, anyone who's writing down, you could actually get caught up on anything that I was saying. Stopping and asking to see if anyone has any questions, just to make sure they actually are catching everything. If they're asking for, like, can you repeat what you just said, it might not be that they weren't paying attention. It just might be you were over here, and they were still stuck back here. It happens a lot in my classes. And then I repeat it and then let everyone get caught up. One thing when you talk about peer note takers and classroom notes, I know that there's some concerns that if we provide the notes, they won't come to class. So one solution would be to possibly make it only available to the people who are actually in class so that they still have to physically come. Skeleton notes and outlines are also another really good technique. Skeleton notes are basically like fill in the blank. That's actually while we're working on this, I realized that one of my professors in college gave us it was back when we photocopied everything and bound it, but we had skeleton note binders, and that was our notes. Like for the entire semester, we actually filled it up, but I still remember all the stuff he was talking about in pop music and American culture to this day. It was a really fascinating class. And then even outlines, where you give them an outline with some of the big headings, but that way they can really concentrate on capturing what's important and don't get bogged down with everything else. I know Marie suggested, like, she had a lot of notes for class, and you just, deduct what you want to take out and just give it to the students, right?
Because we're all super busy, right? So we're not suggesting that you guys should create outlines and special notes with your students. But for many of my classes, I have notes for myself, right? Either in the PowerPoint or when I was teaching more online courses, I would create notes for myself. And so all I do is I give that to the students. Sure, it's a little extra information, and yes, if they don't come to class, they still have that information, but we always say a whole lot more than what's on those notes to begin with. So why not give them the notes and then have them just have to fill in the additional stuff, so then we're decreasing their cognitive load a bit and helping with their executive function. study guide is one that, actually, I have to say, last fall, when students said, will you provide a study guide for this exam? And like my workload was like, I was like, oh.
We made an unspoken pact not to, actually. It's you and me.
So I said, you know what? We'll do it together. And so this is what we did. I created a Google document, and I asked them to create the study guide, and I committed for 1 week before the exam to go into the study guide and delete the things that weren't going to be on the exam. So whoever does the work does the learning, right? So they made the study guide, they made it jointly in the Google Doc, they created the study guide, and then I went in twice and spent about half an hour and put little comments. And the students who were very engaged would go back in and look at my comments and add more comments, and it became this really cool task that really didn't take me a very long time, but I was really helping them learn a lot.
The nice thing about the different kinds of notes and the study guides is that it does help them focus on what's important. Because in all that mess of everything we say, they're probably writing down almost everything we're saying because they're afraid to miss something that's important. But now they have pages and pages to study from that they might not actually need to spend that cognitive energy doing. So we can, in some ways, help them focus on what they really need to do and what they really need to know, and then they can actually spend more of that time on other things because it's going to take them longer to get some of their tasks done anyway. Helps them from getting overwhelmed. So moving on to support and social interaction, I know Liz and Shauna were talking about how we're very scary people and they're afraid to come talk to us. Coming to ask questions, even advocating for themselves. Like maybe they do actually have a condition that they haven't disclosed, or there's something else that they just need from us. They're afraid to come and ask because of all the stigma, possible stigma, and the fact that we apparently scare them. We try not to. And then, of course, there's the group work, navigating the group work of communicating with their group members, managing the dynamics, getting their own work done. The fact that group work can be uncomfortable to begin with, that's a huge concern for them. And then also poor self-esteem. When you look at where they're coming from with all the different things in the past, they're coming from a background of basically being told, you have something wrong with you and you can't do it. And I think we do a lot of, honestly, self-esteem building in the Girls 2 programs. One of the first times where we're putting the power back in their hands, and a few people don't even know what to do with it at first. It's really cool to see them grab it and then start running with it. So that's another reason why they might not be coming to us, just because they just think it's another thing that they're not doing right, and they're already so beaten down in many ways. I think a lot of our students feel that way, though, too. I think about all the messages that we hear time and time again, just growing up in schools. You struggle a little bit in any topic, regardless of what's going on with you. If nothing, you believe it. And so,
Yeah, sorry, I just want to add on this point.
Please.
Sometimes some of the programs that we have, sometimes design and health sciences are so competitive. So it's really competitive programs, how they recognize programs, and that may be an additional intimidation because the students are just competitive with each other. It's hard to confide even in a student to join a study group or get noted to I just missed that, what did they say? So I think we have to just be aware of that, especially in the design and health science fields, that it just creates another level of anxiety with these students because of the competitive nature. So just to keep that in mind.
And I noticed they're very conscious of appearances. They care what other people think. I think it's just the age too. I mean, it doesn't come to me like 40 when you stop caring. But so like that is another, I think, barrier for them.
So possible solutions, initiate the communication on our end. If they're not going to come to us, if there's someone that you notice is struggling on any level for whatever reason, you suspect anything in terms of like the test scores aren't doing so well, just reach out and say, hey, how are things going? Are you doing okay? Is there anything I can do to help you? It's a very open, friendly conversation. And when you do talk to them, minimizing the uses of figures of speech and humor, because for some students, they'll either get misinterpreted, misrepresented, or in the case if someone has autism, it's going to be lost altogether. So it's almost just better just to be straightforward and open, but just objective, because that way your message will actually truly get across, and it will be a much more supportive environment. Of course, if you know the student really well, you obviously tweak that based on your understanding. So if you know you can use figure of speech and humor with a student, go for it. But be aware that for some students, they might actually misinterpret it, or they just not completely understand what you're saying at all because they can't process that. So don't feel like they're not responding to you. It just might be that they just didn't understand. Making it a point to interact with students also can go a very long way. I know Liz found a great statistic about how students who have even a small amount of outside of class interaction with their professors, and students with disabilities, actually end up making it persevering to their second year.
They were more likely to.
They're more likely to. So us just even reaching out and talking to them outside of the literal classroom instruction environment can go a very, very, very long way. When you are talking to them, allowing extra time for responses, we were talking about the processing time, I think a little bit earlier. They're going to take a little bit of time to hear what you said, figure out what you meant, and then actually come up with a response. So give them time to think so they can actually talk to you. Announcing office hours and class. I know from book club this is kind of a hot topic because some people do that and no one takes advantages of it. But it just never hurts to remind people when your office hours are, having it up on the board, otherwise, because for some students, they might just need that extra reminder to remember when they actually are. Other students just might not choose to come. That's their own choice. And just always reminding that we are here to help and be patient and understanding when they are in front of you. Because I know that sometimes we take things personally when we probably shouldn't. We need to remember that it's really not personal. We're laughing at each other because we're both very much guilty of that. We put so much time and effort and love into our courses.
I think keeping in mind that you're going to see some behaviors that are going to look unusual. You might think of them as being rude or disruptive, right? And there are a problem if they happen in the classroom or in group projects or in your interactions in your office, but they're not personal and they often are not intentional. So a lot of those of the things that we perceive as being rude or obnoxious or they're more often than not, they're just about a misunderstanding in the social expectation and social norms and what needs to happen in that moment. And so when you have that reaction of, how rude, or, to take a step back and go, okay, is this, was sometimes the student is truly rude, but I would say many, many times the student has some disability that makes him or her not totally understand what was expected in that moment. And then we have to sort of negotiate it a little bit differently. And still be patient and understand, yes. All right, so then the final challenge and solution we're at last actually, we've got two more. So environmental factors is another thing. So they could be very much like having other issues on top of just cognitive and learning disabilities. It's also the environment that we're in. Some people are very sensitive to the environment. I can guarantee you every single one of us in this room has something that will trigger us. Lights and sound, lights and smells for me. Like this light right now actually is kind of annoying. Yeah, I was just thinking
so everyone has something, but for some people, when they already have executive functioning issues, they're working so hard to try to focus on you that if something else is going on around them, their brain is processing that and getting irritated, and now that's just dividing their attention. For some, it's irritating. For some, it can actually elicit a pain response, like a true painful response for them. So some of the things just from the classrooms here they would notice is that there's noise from various sources. Some of our projectors have like a slight buzz. If you listen closely enough, for some people they can pick that up and that's just going to distract them the entire time. Even the fluorescent light bulbs can buzz a little bit. Our classrooms are very lovely open areas, but sometimes I know the studios especially can get very busy and very loud. Some of our Nexus rooms are very busy and very loud. Even some of our regular rooms where we're just doing a big activity, the noise level just goes like almost immediately. Noise outside of windows, like we were laughing, I think we heard a tree or something fall over here a few minutes ago. Anyone who's taught in the front side of Hayward will know what I'm talking about. When the softball games start going off or traffic, softball games always happen in the middle of like tests for us, it's great. But that can be very distracting for some students. And then visual noise. So lots of posters around or I know we put some posters up to try to break up even just some of the too much white space going on up here. When I walk into Hayward 111, sometimes I will see beautiful drawings and things on the whiteboards. I'll clear off the big whiteboards, but I always feel bad clearing off the smaller whiteboards because they're just so pretty. I don't want to hurt the students' work. But I'll hide them so that they're not distracting to other students because sometimes too much to see can be a problem. You have everything to say?
Just their own computers and devices are the biggest distraction of all.
Yeah, that's part of the visual noise. I know you put up a reminder in class, every class or most classes?
most classes when it becomes a problem.
Right. to remind them that they can't multitask.
Distracts me when I'm
Right.
instructing them.
But these are some of the things that might be going on from a noise standpoint that will actually split their attention away from you. And they're trying really hard to pay attention, but they just can't because these things are irritating them to such a level. Lights, aside from the sound, I guess they're saying the lights were bothering me. The brightness, the fluorescent lights are really hard on our eyes anyway. And if you ever really look at them, like, these ones actually don't have a very quick refresh rate, or have a quick refresh rate, but sometimes you can actually see the flickering. For some students, that actually will be painful for them. The lights themselves can even, just them turning on, can be painful. And we've heard students actually you jolt or actually make a noise when we turn on the lights.
One other thing for a challenge for test taking, sometimes being in a room with someone crinkling a paper, going from page to page is annoying or anxiety provoking. Another thing is if someone is taking a test, test anxiety is not really a disability, but adds on to what they may already be diagnosed with. If the student may see someone else finish a test, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, why am I still on, midway through, they're finished. And then they, get into this never-ending snowball cycle. They'll never finish and they'll break down. And they really know the information. So we like to provide, access for test taking. And that's, one reason why some students do test in our testing office. So they sort of get away from that noise that is within themselves.
Yeah, that's a good example of that too. Thank you. And it smells, that's a hard one to control because we can't really tell someone not to wear their perfume or their shampoo or not bring in certain foods, but just know that certain smells can tip people off. And if someone seems really uncomfortable once you smell something comes in, but some students seem uncomfortable or irritated, it probably just means that they're very sensitive to it. And then touch and personal space. We all have certain levels of personal space that we're comfortable with. Other people need more than others. But for some, an accidental bump, and I'm not talking about just like clothing, that's a whole different set of touch sensitivity to begin with. But even just being bumped accidentally by someone can rattle them enough to knock them off for the rest of the learning time or actually cause physical pain to them. So some solutions that we came up with, knowing that we can only control our classroom environment so much, is turning off the projectors and lights when possible. I've noticed that a lot of the ones in Hayward, at least in the classrooms I teach in, are on dimmers. And so I'm really fond of dimming the lights. I might only turn half of them on to begin with. Probably actually for my own comfort, to be honest with you. But the students actually, when I start playing with the lights, they actually seem to prefer about half of them on anyway, because I've asked them. If you notice that there is someone who does seem to react really viscerally to the light, maybe just figure out which light switch is where that person sits a lot and just turn it off on that side of the room. It'll make them more comfortable. Or announcing when you're about to turn on the light so they can brace themselves and it's not so jarring for them. We actually sometimes use white noise machines. You used it this weekend on campus because it accepted student day in the middle of a midterm. So you think we had $60 from Amazon. It's an itty bitty little thing, and you said it worked great, drowned out all the noise, and the students actually really liked it.
Yeah, there was the first exam I gave where there was no complaints about the students in the hallway making too much noise.
Which I'm always yelling at our students.
And all I did is I put the machine right by the door, and so it's just blocked out, sort of made a noise shield of the noise in the hallway. It was
I have
awesome.
to start borrowing that because I'm always yelling at the students in the hallway for making noise. For our students, I don't yell at anyone else's students, just mine.
And by yell, she means,
I walk down and look and I'm like, that's my yelling. But it makes a huge difference for the people trying to concentrate in the room. Taking down the extra visuals thing, I was talking about how I sometimes will erase the whiteboard stuff and move any smaller whiteboards with pretty designs on them so that it's not up and distracting people. But just being aware of what's up, and if you are allowed to move it, maybe taking it down if you feel like it's just too much that could distract somebody. We've also been known to arrange the desks a little bit to get more personal space and kind of decrease the risk of those accidental bumps. I know sometimes it's hard in some of our rooms because we have a lot of crammed spaces, but if it is possible to provide that space, it can go a long way for the students who really, really don't like being touched. Smells are the harder one, but what we will usually do if we notice that people are getting a little antsy or seem to be aggravated, we allow short re-regulation breaks. So like 2 minutes out of the class, just go outside, do whatever you need to do to calm down, get resituated, come back in, and I can promise you they'll be a lot more attentive when they come back in. And then the final challenge and solution that we have is this concept of cognitive overload, which works with your working memory and your ability to also process the information being given to you. And so if you think of your working memory, we have like a bookshelf, we have 5 things at a time that we can actually work with. And once we start piling on other information that they have to use, other instructions, other expectations, either things are going to get crammed onto that bookshelf so they can make space and try to hold on to everything, and then you can't actually access things as efficiently, or things are just going to start falling off the end of the bookshelf and it's going to get lost. If it can stay on the bookshelf long enough, then it gets put into short-term memory, into long-term memory. But part of it is also this processing of can they process fast enough as well. So if you're putting more and more onto their bookshelf, and they're still stuck on the first couple things, all the stuff is also going to get lost in this cognitive overload. So part of it is planning and organizing. They can't really organize their bookshelf either. And the more that we can do to actually help organize them and plan, it makes it easier for them to pull out what they need in order to get things done and be a little bit more efficient in their cognition. Also, the cognitive flexibility and shifting pops back and like being able to jump between the tasks and being able to divide their attention. Sometimes they're so busy working on some parts of that bookshelf that they can't follow everything else. And so when what we're asking of them or the information is too much for their bookshelf, they go into cognitive overload and they can't learn. No new learning will take place if they just mentally cannot handle everything coming in. So some solutions for that is with new material sticking to maybe 3 or 4 concepts or steps. So that way there's still space on that bookshelf and within the 5 items for them to be able to handle things, organizing topics into chunks with lecture breaks. So you can really dive into one specific thing, really let them sink their teeth into it, and then using those lecture breaks for the active learning part so they can take it off that bookshelf and put it into short-term memory and then also get into long-term memory. Other things that you can do if you're working with a learning management system is decreasing the number of clicks it takes for them to find anything. Because if it's going to take too much energy cognitively for them to find what they need, it's going to be overloading and they're going to be in cognitive overload. So taking away 1 click can actually make a huge difference for people. So then we're talking, just remembering that all these solutions we're talking about within the context of some of our students with disabilities, but it will help all of our students be able to learn.
And we understand this has been a lot of information and in a pretty short amount of time. So we're gonna do something that our faculty, well, my faculty at my university and my faculty here do is a brain break. So we're just gonna take a few minutes to digest all that information, let it sink in. Just if you have anything else you wanted to jot down, feel free to do so. But just take a minute to let it all sink in.
So you're not in cognitive overload.
Yeah. All right. So going off of our little brain break time, just take a moment to jot down or think about any points you need clarification on. Is there anything we just talked about that Monique touched on, those challenges and solutions, or just overall the general strengths and challenges of the students we're referring to? Is there anything you feel you need just a little extra clarification on? And feel free to.
What solutions are currently on campus, for instance? Does IT, when they go around and check the bulbs, they check to make sure there's not a fan that's off? And for when we get new light bulbs, if they're going to be helpful to new students? Put dimmers in new spots.
I don't know. I would assume that no. I would assume that
He knows the answer to that.
I like the question.
My thought was similar to Daniel's. It's like, how do we advocate and lobby to get some of the right tools throughout campus? Half of the rooms we teach in, you can't hear it from the front to the back because of the blowers and all the HVAC systems. How do you, what can we do to help fix it for everybody?
So one of the things that I've done in some classrooms is actually teach from the middle of the room with a clicker. Now this clicker doesn't want to cooperate today, but so I'm physically in the middle of the room because I realized one day that I had a guest lecturer in the front. I was sitting in the back, and I'm like, I can't hear what she's saying. Wow, okay, I don't think I have a hearing impairment, like, what about the rest of the students who've been spending the whole semester back here, and what are they hearing? So we did, the department brought a couple of microphones, and most of the rooms have speaker system, so I can use the microphone and amplify my voice if I want to into the room. But it would be wonderful if there was a way to institutionally, as we're building a new building, getting some things like that.
How do
If
we
you have an
advocate?
option to use a mic, I know I have some auditory filtering issues and different things going on, and if I participate in a meeting remotely with headphones, I retain a lot more of the information. And FM systems that they sometimes use for people with hearing aids, they often use those same systems for people with attention issues. And they retain so much more information when somebody uses the mic, because it helps them register the information and then also filter the unimportant information as well.
And with less of, those were very, specific to the physical things of where we can help. But you did ask, just one of you, something about actually where can you go? And we actually are going to talk about some of the resources, some of the people that can.
But so part of it is there's some resources to help all of us, but part of it is how do we bring this information up in the hierarchy. This is why I'm bringing Jeff. You're in charge of bringing it up to the hierarchy.
Send everything to me and I'll bring it up.
I like that. I like that
Yeah.
idea. Any other clarifications that about anything that you guys would like?
Is there any evidence around how long a brain break should be?
I haven't looked it up. I'm sure there is some. I haven't looked it up. But in class, it takes about a minute. I really do it just for a minute.
Okay.
And I have them close their, and literally I have them close their eyes, do nothing for 1 minute. And like the whole energy goes, oh. We'll also do this 3 deep breath concept sometimes, but they seem to engage better in the brain break.
And if anyone is interested, there are a lot of resources out there on mindfulness, and brain breaks are just one of those very easy ways to incorporate mindfulness.
If you need to get energy back in the room, you can go old school and use what they do with little kids and just put Go Noodle on.
Oh, God.
And the kids will have, or the students will have a class, they might have a little trouble coming back. But if you really have like a low energy group.
I love Go Noodle. We used it at home on the snow day. I have elementary children and indoor research. It's awesome.
I'm also just like put salsa music on in the room to try to rev things up if needed. But most of the time, by the time I get them at the end of the day this semester, they need quiet time. Yeah. They're done. Yeah. All right. So let's try this. So this is what I want you guys to do. We've talked about a whole bunch of resources, and that's why we gave you the PowerPoint so you didn't have to remember all of it. So I want you guys to think about at least one of your courses, or the courses that you teach overall. Think about one aspect of your course that you might change to help build the ramp, and what strategies you might use to achieve that, as well as any information or support that you're going to need to make that happen. So let's take just, and you can, if you want to do it on your own, you can do it on your own. If you prefer to think with a peer partner, that's okay too. And so let's say take about 5 minutes, and you can jot that down on a piece of paper, and we can all talk about it together.
Should we label it?
So who wants to talk about an aspect of their course that they're thinking that they might change or shift? I like to use the word shift. Somehow the word change tends to be scary, but if you ask people to shift, somehow that seems less scary.
One thing we've been working with is the syllabi. And the syllabi that we're, quote, required to use are horrible. They do not support learning. As you just said, it's a legal document, So we've been trying to take all that legal boilerplate, and we post it in Blackboard at the beginning of every term and say, okay, everybody look here for your academic policies. And then look at your syllabus for getting you excited about what you're going to learn this term and how are you going to do that and what do you need to do. And we use an organizer. So we do a week to week of, all the things they have to do. But really trying to figure out better ways to get students understanding what it is they're learning in that class And better ways to present that are something we're still trying to work through.
And there is, you'll see on one of the slides, one of the resources that we put on comes from it comes from the website called UDL on Campus, which is Universal Design for Learning. It was initially through CAST a K to 12 information, but now there's a new website specifically for higher education, and they have a whole section on syllabus and examples of syllabus that are designed in a universal design way, and we put the link into the PowerPoint. So that's one thing that you are already doing. Are there any other strategies that you think you might try to implement to make things more accessible for all students in your courses? Now you'll be
Great.
close up.
I was talking to Joe before about this thing that I'm using. I just got a document camera and learned to record on that, and I'm really seeing the benefits of it because students can watch that on their own time. They can repeat it as many times as they want. They can slow it down, speed it up. But I'm also using it to walk through assignments. So rather than have all that text and you get lost in all the details, I'm going to an exemplary assignment and walking through the components of why it was good. And I hope that will sort of lead any student down the process and make it a little more clear rather than just saying, here's the assignment, go read it, decipher it yourself. I'm kind of walking them through it and deciphering it with them.
So you're recording the lecture as well as recording the feedback for an exemplary assignment to help them learn.
Well, I'm recording, now this is post-class.
Okay.
I'm 2 or 3 minute little videos of things that I find important, and one of them is walking them through the assignment.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anita, you'd raise your hand too.
We have, I'm hearing great ideas here and a lot of awesome ideas, but having an undergrad son going here, when he's looking frustrated or whatever, I said, check Blackboard, look at the syllabus. They don't use Blackboard. Are you kidding me? Who? Check the syllabus. Isn't it posted on Blackboard? We got it the day before class started, so I didn't have a chance to really, or it didn't come in until a week after class started. Consistency would be really good for everybody, especially those that we're trying to assist. But a lot of times, unfortunately, some of these classes, I don't know if it's the full-time faculty, if it's adjuncts that are only here for a semester and bye-bye. I'm not sure exactly. I can't pinpoint that. But I think a little more uniformity across the board, especially for the undergrads and your freshman, sophomore who are just still, in that, oh my God, no one's holding my hand. I really think we need to utilize all the great technology that we have. Posting your lectures and specifics. It's awesome. I know, our professors do that. They bend over backwards to make sure that the proper information is available and reiterated. And that's what we need a lot of times, is just that clarity. Bam, this is what you need, A, B, C. And
Clarity is key.
Clarity is key.
it goes so far.
And definitely Blackboard, you don't have to go super fancy in Blackboard, but using Blackboard will help students stay organized and know where to find information. And at least in our department, we have skeleton instructions for adjunct faculties to learn to use Blackboard. And I'm sure, although I'm speaking for Wendy, but I'm sure that she'd be willing to share them. So if anybody else in their program has adjunct faculty and they want some simple instructions on how they should use Blackboard, we have that created. Just contact us and we'll get that to you guys. All right, anybody else who had some thoughts about something in their course that they are willing to shift?
It really struck a chord when you talked about being able to click on something and find it easily. That was actually feedback I got from my students last semester. And then this semester, I experienced the over-clicking syndrome. And it was so frustrating that I'm really going to try to make an effort to be very, again, clarity is key. Be able to find something very simply and not make it a million clicks to get to it.
One of the things that struck me is rubrics. I have rubrics for every single assignment, but students don't understand exactly what each component is. Maybe in the video next to the rubric explaining exactly what's needed for each assignment so they know that what the expectations are.
And some students don't process what's written nearly as well as what we say. And so, as we say to students, read the syllabus or it's in the syllabus, that might be really overwhelming. So sometimes a quick verbal conversations or a quick video. Now the video recording tools that we have access to are so easy to use. I have been using Zoom, which is to record, because in Zoom you can actually record to the web into their platform. So and then it generates a link that comes to my email, and I just put that link in Blackboard. So literally, so I go in class and I set up my microphone, which on my computer works, and then I just do my class, right? And then when class is finished, I end the meeting. It asks me if the video should go into the cloud. I say yes. I wrap things up. The next morning when I open my email, there's a link. I take the link and I put it in Blackboard, and that's it. Like, it's no extra work. But then if anybody has a question about, so what did she mean by, they can go back to the video. It's not as good as a highly processed video, but it's additional information for the students to learn better that way. It can help them with taking notes. If they didn't, have enough time, they can go back to the video. So it's a great resource. Any other changes or things that you guys thought, oh, I could do this in class?
I just want to add on that as well, so for clarity for students and also for instructors, fewer questions, fewer, cases of miscommunication. So if we have that, these tools, we can really emphasize how it can help the instructors in the long term as well. They'll get the assignments that that they really expect, and the expectations will be more likely to be met as well. So it's really a good tool for everyone on both sides.
And if there's a snow day, you have your lecture from last year that you can just pop right on there. You don't even have to worry about it.
I've been thinking about that. I can spend more time in Florida in February and less time in the classroom, but don't tell anybody. Any other things that you guys have picked up from this conversation that you think you'll change?
I just wish, is this recording today?
Yeah.
I want to show this to my fieldwork educators. The body language stuff I think is so important. Some of body language issues in students are perceived as attitude problems and being unprofessional, and students who can't control yawning or have self-regulation issues. The fieldwork community is not patient with any of that at all.
And those are occupational therapists who you would think would understand disabilities and be accommodating, right?
Right.
So, anything else that you guys think, oh, I could do this?
I just want to say, as a student, Blackboard is everything. So it does boggle the mind to not use it. So please, on behalf of your students, just have it all in one place. You don't have to look for it. You don't have to keep it in a folder. You can just keep referring to it. And a lot of these students look at things over and over and over again because you have to, because that's how you process. That's how I do it. So I can just go to Blackboard, look at my syllabus, look at the assignment, look at the rubric 100 times, and it's easy. So I thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So when you're understanding a rubric, what can we do to make that easier, clearer, more meaningful?
Sometimes they do get confusing, but I think what they said was right, putting the concepts of the project clearly in the boxes, and then how many points are each of these things worth? Because sometimes you'll spend an hour on something that was worth 5 points. Mm-hmm. Where you could have just let it go, you'll be okay without those 5 points. I know that, especially with the design projects, and all the other disciplines, there's concepts for each of these, but is something more important than the other? Should you spend your time on this and not on some other detail? Because I've heard from our clients, they spend hours on things and then they don't understand why they still didn't get a good grade. And I think it's because they're focusing on the wrong things, and they don't understand what is important and what's not.
Is there a way to lay that out?
Yeah, I think in the
that
boxes
would make
you
it
can.
better? Not so much in the boxes, but in the
In the instructions.
is it helpful to put the ones that are high value points all first?
Absolutely.
Do them in descending
Bold
order?
them.
What, you know, because mine is like my logical sense, you know, content, introduction, you
Right.
know,
And if-
significant, whatever.
Yeah, and
And
they're not
then
gonna make you
technical.
see that, it's gonna be different, it doesn't make logical sense.
And we can add, Jeff had asked us to give him the final PowerPoint. And now I'm thinking we should give you the link to the final PowerPoint. This way we can add to the resource. So there are some resources around rubrics specifically, and we can add those in. One of the challenges I've seen with rubrics is sometimes they're too wordy.
Right.
So there's a balance of how much detail you put in. Sometimes we use words that are imprecise. They mean something to us, but they don't mean the same thing to the students. And sometimes we have criteria that are in our head that are really hard to put on paper. And so in the last, like I said a lot, making everything implicit explicit, making sure that everything is explicitly stated in simple, concise, consistent terminology. But I know that there's a website that has a lot of rubric examples with quality tips for rubrics. We'll add that to their resources as well. One thing that I didn't make it to the slide, but as I see you, we were talking about videotaping. That we've done some this semester has been in the classes where there's a lot of demonstration going on, and so the students have a really hard time taking notes and watching at the same time. So we've encouraged students to take videos of the demonstration, I think that's a great resource to use in any of the classes where you actually are demonstrating something for the students, allowing them to take a video or taking a video yourself and then posting those links into Blackboard so that they don't have to retain every single step, right, of what you're doing. It's all there in the video library.
And that's great for universal design. Then they can focus on possibly the conversation or another aspect, but not the specific details of, whatever, the project and design is. So it's a great resource in just posting it and, that could, again, eliminate.
Yes, forever. You'll have to
Eliminate
video
a lot.
it again.
Yep. It's sort of like a flipped classroom, in fact, just with doing. And then again, you could possibly have maybe more group dialogue in the classroom. That flipped classroom really works for everyone.
All right, so this was a quick, an hour and a half. I guess an hour and a half, I don't know if that's quick, but it's quick for the scope of the topic. Review of some of the things that we can do. A lot more could be done, but a lot of the things we just glossed over really quickly. So you might be feeling like, I don't know, how do I get this done? Who can help? Accessing the instructional designer, and May has wonderful skill and knowledge around ways to help with syllabus and rubrics and Blackboard, for example. She's a great resource to help you. Of course, Jeff and Nexus Learning, and bringing to him some of the things that we want more training around and more help around. He's always great at finding our resources and working with Penn Charter and helping us get the information that we need, and the Nexus advocates as well. Zoe's office, is available to help with student-specific stuff, but also like some broader thinking. And then the Gold Square program, which is Monique and I in a permanent kind of way, and then our students are available to help faculty around consultations. Just a reminder that those consultations are not student-specific. They're about a specific problem or something that you want some help around. And we've done a couple this semester. All right, final exit card. So take a moment, think about one of your concerns around supporting students with disabilities on campus, and reflect on anything that might have shifted within yourself related to this concern. So, in the aha moments, anything that you want to share? Final thoughts.
I just had a very small thing, but I teach in this space for the most part, and it did not occur to me to come in and clear off the stuff from the whiteboards that students may have left from before, because I'm always like, oh, hey, that's cool and interesting, but never occurred to me to think of that as a distraction for, for the students coming in.
This space is very bright. We didn't do it, but we should have turned off the lights. Because the whole, like, by this point, I have a headache of just having to squint my eyes at the light in this room. And so that's true for me. It's going to be true for many of the students as well. Other aha moments.
I don't know if it's an aha moment or a concern, but in the School of Continuing and Professional Studies, our students are here in the evenings. How can we make sure that they are supported?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unique set of issues.
Mm-hmm. And also the adjuncts that teach in CPS, their adjuncts, how are they getting access to this information so that it can be used and they can look at the syllabi and look at their classroom environments, and how is that information being communicated to all the adjuncts as well?
Those are excellent points. I wish we could have like a brainstorming session, and maybe we're up to the higher beings. I don't know, because that's a real concern. I know during the day we do have learning support system in place after hours, and we started that last spring, and that's really worked out with the kids with the Academic Success Center, the learning support specialist there, and she has evening hours, well, at 4 to 8, she's sometimes there until 7, 8 o'clock, which is when really the students, they just get started then,
So that's new. So there's now supports in the evening, and they also provide supports using distance mode now, because I know you guys are on Bucks campus. So but that's fairly new this year.
So to get this information to adjuncts is really key.
Well,
We get emails.
You get emails, right? I'm being recorded here, so I'm going to, it's just an epiphany in my mind. We all know how productive the faculty meetings are, right? We could make them more productive. Like this hour and a half was incredible. That you raised awareness, but you came in with these strategies and solutions. Every faculty member needs to hear this. We need to do this. And then those faculty members, the full-timers, the program directors, they need to take it to the adjuncts. And they need to do it in a strategized way, a sustained way, not these one-hit wonders of a workshop where you come and go feeling energized, but you go back to your office going, rest of my life has to deal with, right? So I hear you. This is what I struggle with all the time, but there's opportunities like faculty meetings or other things. I hate to use the word mandatory, but we have to get to a place where we have to all equalize ourselves to be good teachers. And this is good best practices. This is universal design. Everybody needs to be doing this, including using Blackboard. And these are common baseline strategies.
And I guess, step forward, little steps, to get to that place, possibly in a meeting, the department chairs and, who work with the adjuncts. And maybe that's the first step. I don't know, but we do need to take baby steps to get this across.
I know that Larenda looked a lot at what the adjuncts in the UT departments needed, did a study around that. That's about to get published, by the way. So I think there is knowledge and expertise, and there are ways that we can make that happen for sure. Other aha moments. High notes. Let's finish up on that. We have to talk to the administration, who we love. But let's finish on a high positive note.
Spring break.
Thank you
Come on, there's nothing. All right, Liz. Anything that you learned this semester that you're gonna take with you working with clients?
Well, I learned lots of things. A lot of them relate to OT. A lot of them relate to our coaching method. If you let them come up with their own solutions, they're 10,000 times more likely to follow through with them. I also learned that they can learn these skills. Like I've seen it happen from the students that were here last semester. They're starting to organize, they're writing to-do lists, they're organizing their study time. So like it can happen, and now they're being more successful. And then so they'll take we're supporting them, yes, but we're also, trying, what's the word I'm looking for? not scaffolding, but
Fade.
fading.
Fade
We're trying
support.
to fade those supports so that when they go out in the real world, they have those skills, and like it's totally possible. It's awesome.
Shauna.
Just really quick, and so they can self-advocate.
Yes.
But I think the biggest thing I'm gonna take with me, along with many things, is just the power of taking a minute to let someone think. So we're brainstorming, we're doing all this, they're thinking of all these ideas, I'm thinking of ideas. Just taking a second to look at the board. Okay, what did we just talk about? Do you have any questions about what we just talked about? And then taking the next step forward. So just like the power of that 30-second minute break.
Going slower.
Thank you guys for, just go ahead.
I was gonna say, another thing that I've found that's been working this term in my class is building off of what you just said. As they walk out the door, we do write down your question on the flip chart, and we'll come back to it next week. And so what they've thought about, what they're still processing, if it's still confusing or it still isn't a complete thought, we can come back and build, and that reiteration I'm finding to be helpful.
Yeah, and sorry, really quick, just piggybacking off one more time, is that something I know is helpful in my courses as a graduate student and an undergraduate student is you could go to a discussion board on Blackboard instead of everyone emailing the same questions to the professors, and you would get a notification when someone posts a discussion board question, and it's like, oh, I was thinking that same thing, and maybe the faculty member decides to answer all those questions in class. Maybe it's a one-on-one, maybe it's on the discussion board, whatever the case may be. But just having a place where you can just put those out there.
That's a great strategy. All right, so as we're wrapping up, we just want to acknowledge really everybody that's been making this possible. Of course, the Nexus Grant last year made it possible for us to do this pilot year of the Gold Square program. Our OT fieldwork students are the ones working with the students with disabilities on campus. Without them, this would not be happening. The program evaluator, Janet, who's not here today, who's one of my doctoral students, who's evaluating the outcomes of this project and how it's working. And then the grad assistants, of course, the clients, they're amazing. Just most importantly, I think for the clients themselves is all the faculty collaborators, all the people who we've worked with clients and who have been willing to make small shifts, big shifts to how they do things so that we could help the clients better. And Anne, do you allow me to say thank you? Anne has been one of the faculty members who has worked above and beyond some more to help us with some of the clients, and I'm very grateful. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your time today.